Hello. Welcome to our next session of this wonderful class that we have called Let's Cross to the Other Side, based on the very words of Jesus Christ. And it is a class where we are learning how to communicate Christ cross-culturally. We have been looking at some of the examples in the Bible. We have been looking about attitudes we are to have when we're communicating. Today we'll be looking at a couple of things, but one of them is listening. And we are to listen not just to the words being spoken. In one of the first videos, we talked about how communication is achieved not only through words, but how communication is achieved through writings, through traditions, through customs, uh, and through music, many other ways. So, as a culture communicates, we are to listen not only to what they're saying with their words, but we are to listen to every other aspect. So there are four words that we're looking at today, and I'm going to start sharing the screen, and then we'll talk about an example in the book of First Kings when King Solomon was faced with a very interesting situation, and we'll learn how he listened and how he was able to apply these four uh, these four principles that we're going to talk about. So let's get into the material. All right, let's listen. Let's listen. Here we go. So, in order to communicate, notice how I said, in order to communicate, one must first listen carefully, attentively, and without prejudice. This is very important. Without prejudice. Without prejudice. Notice in our passage, in the passage that we're looking at, notice how King Solomon, and I have it right here. Notice it says two prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. Imagine that today. If two prostitutes were to walk into one of our churches and say, "We have a problem. We are two prostitutes and we have a problem." And we would go, "Of course you have a problem. You're a prostitute." Immediately. But the king did not do that. The king did not do that. Very, very, very interesting. It's this, I love this part. And he was without prejudice. He was willing to listen. He was not tolerating. He was willing to listen. So there's four defined types of listening that we see in this passage, and we see in several other passages. And I want to thank Pastor Kendra for bringing up this specific passage to our class today, and it's the perfect one to start with. Analytical, analytical. Just like we share some of the students previous to this video, they were sharing their findings on this in these four types of listening. The analytical, the analytical. This is where the listener's main task, that's important, his main task is to seek to understand the information being offered. If you remember, we talked about this last week, how information is being transferred not only when words are being spoken, there's information being transferred in the environment. There's information being transferred culturally. There's information being transferred in body language. There's information being transferred in the tone of the voice. There's information being transferred maybe in the written in quotes that are being said. And then the information is being perceived. Once the information is being perceived, then information is given back, and so communication is taking place. But the task of the listener is to understand the information being offered. Maybe the listener needs to ask some questions. Maybe the listener needs to stop. Maybe the listener needs to quiet the voices in his head. Maybe the listener needs to clear out his mind and say, "I'm going to listen carefully. I'm going to listen attentively, and I'm going to listen without prejudice." So the main task as you're listening to the communication being offered is to understand that information. Is to understand that information. No answer is to be given yet. No answer is to be given. No solution is to be given. Notice how the king kept listening. One of them said, "Pardon me, this woman and I live," and they kept talking and talking and talking. So they kept talking until the king said, until verse 23, when the king said, this one says, my son is alive, and your son is dead, while the other one says, your son is dead and mine is alive. Notice that the king used exactly the order that the women were using. Notice at verse 22, the other woman said, I'm sorry, no, the living one is my son, the dead one is yours. But the first one said, no, the dead one is yours and the living one is mine. Notice how they said it backwards. They said it backwards. And the king repeated it. He didn't say, you say one thing, you say another. No, he said, I'm listening. I'm understanding. The problem here is that one says, mine's alive and the other one is dead. And the other one says, yours is dead and mine is alive. Notice how the king understood what was going on. And he understood that one emphasized on the living and then the dead. The other one emphasized on the dead and then the living. Okay? Very, very important. Very important. So the king took the time to listen. Now, here comes the empathic. Sorry, I'm having a problem here today with my pronunciation. But here, the listener's main task, again, the main task is to seek the same feelings as the speaker. So the king listened to the whole story. He said, "Oh, one of the women said, I got up and my son was dead, but I looked at him closer, and mine is not the dead one. She's got she's got mine. Mine is the one alive, and everything." And the king said, "Okay, let me see if I understand everything that happened. Not only I understand everything that happened, everything that took place, but I see how you feel about it." He told one woman, "You feel like your son is dead and the other one is alive. The other ones, you feel like the other one is alive and yours is dead." I'm sorry, I think I said that wrong. I just want to make sure. Notice that the words that the king used. The king said, this one says, my son is alive and your son is dead. While the other one says, no, your son is dead and mine is alive. The king was connecting. The kid was saying, okay, I want to make sure I understand how you feel about this. The first woman feels like her son is alive and the other one is dead. But the other woman feels different. The other woman feels like your son is dead and mine is alive. Notice there's a different feeling here. I cannot get into this. There's something here called the chiasmus. The chiasmus, it's a figure of speech in the Bible. And I'm not talking about that one today. It's beautiful. Maybe we'll take some time in a different day to talk about that. So his main task was to understand how they were feeling about it. Then analogical. The analogical. Here, the listener's main task, the main task of the listener is to seek to connect the listener's world with the speaker's world. Okay, so he's saying, oh, not he, the task here of the listener is, how do I connect my world with the person who's speaking? I need to connect my world to that person. I need to connect everything in my world to everything in the world of the other person. Culturally, when two cultures come together, we as evangelists, as cross-cultural evangelists, our main our big our first task, our first approach is to be the one who listens. The one who listens. We need to listen to everything. We need to listen to the information that is given to us constantly. We walk into a different culture, a group of people with a different culture, and they're immediately giving us information, even if before they're talking to us. They're immediately giving us information, and we are to listen and understand all the information they're giving us. Number two, we are to connect to the way they feel. Number three, we are to connect our world with their world, not impose, not tell them, you guys are different, I bring something better. No, we are to connect our world to their world, finding common ground. And then the last one, the listener's main task is to seek to integrate the information presented into the reality of the broader context. So the two women came and they gave the king information. And he said, okay, I have heard the information and I understand it. You say one thing and you say another thing. Okay. I know how you feel about this. I know how you feel. I'm seeking the same feelings here. Okay. Next one. Next, the king said, okay, I'm going to connect my world with your world. I'm the king. I can rule anything I want here. I can say what's going to happen here. He asked them to bring a sword. Notice he was connecting his world with their world. He said, I'm the king. In my world, I'm the king. In your world, I'm the king. In your world, I'm the king. In my world, I'm the king. Notice everything, how I'm using the words here. Your world, two prostitutes. My world, the king. We're going to connect this. I rule. Bring me a sword. I'm going to make the decision. And then he presented them with the reality of a broader contest. Listen, we're about to lose a life here. I have a solution, and this is the only way I can resolve it because you guys cannot resolve it. And then communication began, and the king was able to find an answer. But notice he went through all of this process, this whole steps right here. Okay? And I want to make sure we understand how we can read passages like this. Did everybody, or if you have a question right now, this is a good moment to ask a question because we're going to do a couple of exercises in reading the scriptures, looking for this particular elements, the element of the analytical listening, the empathetic moment, the analogical moment, and the integrative moment. Does anybody have any questions right now on this? Or let me ask it like this. Were you able to see these parts right here? Okay, I think if we do an exercise, it'll help. I'm going to pause the recording. And meanwhile, I want everybody to please go and find and if you're watching this video, go and find the passage where Jesus healed Bartimaeus. Okay, and we are going to do an exercise. We're going to look for these elements here in communication. We will be back after the students finish the exercise. All right, we are back from a beautiful time of exercises, uh, reading the word, looking at the way Jesus did things and the way the Bible uh, presents these teachings on how we are to communicate when what the goal is and the ways that we are to not just listen but give information, process information, connecting. And it's very important that we learn that cycle. Very, very important that we learn that cycle. If we learn the cycle, we will arrive to the point where we can bring a beautiful teaching, and it will connect with the environment that is receiving us, and it will not draw the attention just to us. It'll draw the attention to Jesus Christ. Um, I want to start this portion of the class with the reading on the book of Acts, chapter 1, verse 8. Acts chapter 1, verse 8.
But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Sounds a lot like let's cross to the other side, right? Sounds a lot like let's cross to the other side. Now, this is a calling to a this is a multicultural calling. This is Jesus saying, you will find this cultures as you go preach the gospel. But you cannot do it without the power of the Holy Spirit. You cannot do it. So we have been we have been I have been sharing the Bible verse in the book of Luke where it says when Jesus got in the boat and told them, let's cross to the other side. And then he went, he performed miracles, he did teachings, and of course he was training the apostles. And then in this verse, that is a very well-known verse, the Great Commission, we as now cross-cultural evangelists, we need to start reading also those aspects in every verse, even though we already know them. We already know this verse. We know it's the Great Commission. We talk about, oh, Jerusalem is the place where I live. Judea is a little bit farther, and But yes, look at it as a calling. This is a calling to go to the other side, to engage on multicultural, cross-cultural evangelism. Jesus says, do it, but do it with the power of the Holy Spirit. Now, I'm going to share my screen now, and I want us to take a look at certain things. I left you last week with a question, and I'm going to go back to this Bible verse, then we're going to watch a video. Again, I love these videos, and then we'll talk about a couple more things that we need to learn tonight. It's coming. There it is. All right. If you remember this verse, one day Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." So they got into a boat and started out. Let's watch this video.
Do you know what multicultural means? It means when more than one cultural group influences a person or a community. Most of us come from or are influenced by multiple cultures. Your life and community might be multicultural in ways that you don't even realize. For example, have you ever heard of the word barbecue? It's a word that comes from Taino, the language spoken by the Taino people, a group of indigenous peoples from the Caribbean. Or have you ever been to a restaurant? Did you know that the idea of restaurants originated in France and is only a few hundred years old? Many countries have lots of cultural and ethnic groups living in one place. Being multicultural means recognizing and embracing the value of all of the cultures around you. This can include learning about and sharing language and communication practices, as well as learning about big concepts like religion, family, foods, celebrations, and attitudes towards work and other areas of life. While some of these big concepts may be hard to see immediately, things like foods and celebrations are an easy way to start exploring multiculturality. For example, maybe your family shares spiced hot chocolate during the holidays, a Peruvian tradition. Or maybe your neighbor serves latkes, fried potato pancakes, a food that originated in Eastern Europe and is commonly shared as a part of Hanukkah celebrations. Or think more broadly about celebrations. Did you know that there are more than 20 major holidays that are typically celebrated between October and February around the world? And that your community might have some of these celebrations? For example, you may see luminarias, or little paper lanterns, lighting pathways on Christmas Eve, particularly if you live in the southwestern US. These come from Spain and Mexico and the tradition known as Las Posadas. Or you may attend a Lunar New Year celebration, which is common in many parts of Asia. Remember, as you keep learning, you will start to understand more about each culture, even the ideas that aren't so easy to observe. And learning more is always something to celebrate.
All right. So for us as Christians, this is something we need to be very aware of, how the world is today. And I want to bring our attention to a couple of things here today. Number one, for us as Christians, we need to understand that diversity is constantly increasing. Constantly increasing. There's diversity everywhere, and it's not just in a different place, it's right here where we live. And when I say here, I mean where I am in the United States right now or where you are in Belize. Diversity is constantly increasing. There's global population growth, there's migration, internal and external. People are migrating not just from one country to the other. People are migrating from one village to the other. People are migrating from the north to the south. People are migrating everywhere. That continues to happen. And it's more and more. We see it more and more today. The increase in media. Because of the increase in media, we are exposed to other cultures. We can learn about cultures everywhere else in the world, and maybe we'll never get to visit those places, but we can learn about them. And due to increasing media, there's many changes, and people are starting to adopt some of the aspects of a different culture just by learning about them through media. Maybe somebody sees somebody from Belize looks at a video that was filmed in Korea and likes that kind of food, and they said, "Oh, I can make that kind of food," and they start making that kind of food. Or somebody sees how somebody dresses, and they said, "Oh, they don't sell that kind of clothing in my country, but I can order it on the internet." And you order it, and FedEx brings it, and you're wearing a piece of cloth from a different culture. So we must be aware of that. Now, new demographic developments. Notice I use the word demographic developments, not industrial, not technology, but demographic developments. 4 decades ago, preaching the gospel meant sending missionaries around the world to convert. Remember that word we used it last time, pagans? Pagans, sometimes we think it's a bad word or a mean word. No, it just means somebody who believes something different than I believe. Today, the mission field has come to our neighborhood. How do we respond? How do we respond? We are, I know, but the places I visited in Belize, there's not just Belizean people in Belize. There is people from everywhere. It's same as it's kind of like the United States, but little. I could hear different kinds of music. I could hear different kinds of food and everything. Yet the Belizean culture is still well established there. So how do we respond to the fact that in order to be a missionary, you may not need to leave your country. You may not even need to leave your town. There's different cultures already. The demographic developments. So I want us to look at Paul's attitude, the way Paul approached this. We're going to be looking at Acts chapter 17, and I want you to write down this too, Acts chapter 17, verses 23 and 28. I'm going to be reading more of the passage, and again, we're going to be reading it as cross-cultural evangelists. Remember to be thinking like that. You are no longer just preachers of the word or people who study the Bible. You are now becoming a cross-cultural evangelist. You are more aware of that, and we find our model in the Bible. So here we go. Acts chapter 17. Okay. All right. I'm going to start in verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. Okay, there it is. Distress is the word I want you to look at here. Something was bugging Paul. Was it just because he was a Christian and they were not? Or because it was a culture shock? Imagine Paul in Athens. It's a city in Greece. And he looks around the city and he's going, there's many idols here. There's the beginning of a culture shock. He was he had that shock. He said, there's too many idols here, there's too much idolatry, there's other gods there. Big culture shock. Continue. Let's continue. Remember, he came from the Jewish tradition where there's one God. Yes, there was idolatry, but one God was the normal. Here, the normal is many gods. Big culture shock. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. So what happened? He started talking to everybody about it. He started saying, hey, this is not how it is. This is wrong. Let's talk to the religious people. And then notice he was having a conversation, but we don't know if he was making headway. But he was trying to tell them, you are different than me. I'm different than you. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers, noting these are not religious people, philosophers began to debate with him. Now they were fighting. They were telling him, hey, wait a minute, you are arguing with us. We're not just reasoning, we're debating now. There's conversation taking place. There's connection. We could do the exercise of all those the listening, how you're processing information, you try to connect with the feelings. All of that it's available here. Maybe you should do it on your own. But they began to debate with him. Some of them asked, what is this babbler what is this babbler trying to say? They were treating him as somebody crazy. They're going, what is he trying to say? We don't get it. We don't understand. Imagine how Paul was speaking, how frustrated he was, to the point where they said, we don't know what he's trying to say. Is he trying to teach us something? Is he trying to is he crazy? What's happening with him? Notice the progression in Paul's attitude. They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. He had a good message, but they didn't see it that way. They didn't see it that way. He went immediately to preach the gospel. He said, okay, let me tell you about Jesus. He's the real king. He is this. And his teachings are this. And they're going, what is this? What are you trying to say? It doesn't make sense to us. Paul was trying to impose something. Okay, let's continue. Then they took him and brought him into a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, notice how nice the people were. May we know what is this new teaching that you are presenting? Notice that the people there in Athens were ready to listen, even though Paul was just in shock, trying to impose something, trying to argue with them, trying to debate. They brought him in and said, "Hey, can you tell us what is it that you're trying to teach us? You're presenting something. We understand you're presenting something." Very cross-cultural shock going on here for both of them. Paul didn't get him. They didn't get Paul. Oh my goodness. You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears. And we would like to know what they mean. And Paul is going, what? You don't get it? This is Jesus I'm talking about. Come on, guys. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. You know, he wants to save you. He died at the cross. And they're going, we don't understand what you're saying. We want to know. We're trying to understand them. All the Athenians and the foreigners who live there spend their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. So Paul said, okay, this is a group of people who like to renew their ideas. What does this tell me? That in this culture, many ideas were changing constantly. What is the latest thing? What is the newest thing? What is the newest thing? What's coming? They were bored of something and they get, okay, what's the newest thing? They were bored of something, what's the newest thing? Does that sound like a culture to you? Do you know people like that who are always after the newest thing?
Hmm.
Those of you who are pastors here, have you noticed that after 2020, there's all these teachings on Facebook and everywhere, and always somebody's telling us, Pastor, have you heard about this? Oh, I learned this on YouTube. Oh, I learned this on Facebook. I learned this on Instagram. And they're always listening to new ideas. There's a culture like that. Well, I'm not going to get into that preaching right now, but it's important. Now, look at this, verse 22. Paul has a change of heart here. Something happened in him. He said, okay, I'm in shock. They are in shock. Let's take care of this. Listen to me. Let's pay attention to this moment because this will help us reach any culture. This will help us. Listen, Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, people of Athens. Oh, okay. He acknowledged them. He gave them their place. He didn't say pagans, right? He didn't say sinners. He said, people of Athens, I recognize who you are. I recognize where you are. I see that in every way you are very religious. He said, he connected with them. I'm religious. You are religious. You see that? Beautiful, beautiful. We can't just walk up to somebody and say, you're a sinner. You're a heathen. What you have going on is a sin. You're going to hell. No, we don't say that. We tell them, hey, hello. I'm from here. You're from there. Immediately he started uplifting them. I see that you're religious. I see that you're devout. I see that you respect the gods. You respect your religion. For as I walked around and looked carefully. Okay, notice two things that Paul did. He walked around and he looked carefully. Please keep this in mind. At your objects of worship. He said, I'm listening to what you're communicating to me. He didn't say, some of your teachers taught me this. No, he said, I looked and I gathered your information and I noticed you have objects of worship. That tells me that you're religious. And you are religious people of Athens. Notice how he was adapting. Immediately, he was adapting. I even found an altar with an inscription to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. and this is what I am going to proclaim to you. He said, I'm not giving you anything new. I'm just bringing light to what you already know. Ah, how beautiful that is. Every culture, and listen to me, pastors and evangelists and servants of God, in every culture, people are already looking for God. They know there's a supreme being. They just may not understand it yet. And he's telling them, I'm not bringing you anything new. I'm bringing you light to what you don't see yet. I know he used the word ignorant. That was a little strong. But these were thinkers. These were men of high intelligence. They could take it. I want you to look at verse 28 after he presented Jesus. Look at verse 28. Look at this. For in him we live and move and have our being. Who knows that song? You ever sang that song? In him we move and live and have our being, right? I want you to notice who wrote this. Who wrote that line? It wasn't King David, it wasn't the book of Psalms, it wasn't Moses, it was not some worshiper. Who wrote that line? I'm going to read the verse and I want you to tell me who wrote that line. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Where did Paul get that line? Anybody? Where did he get that line? From their poetry. He read their poetry. He read the Athenian poetry and he said, I found something in your poetry. Let me repeat it to you. So Paul looked around, he examined, he noticed, he read their literature, and then he was able to communicate with them. And notice he used a line from their own poets. I want to know what you think about this. Have we ever gone into a different culture and read what they write? Or do we just want to bring our Bible and tell them that everything they have is no good, but what we have is the only good thing, without even knowing where they stand? He said, you are very religious. Good for you. You understand that there's gods, and you understand there's a God that you don't know about. You're closer than you think. In fact, your poets know it. I've read it. I looked at your city. I looked at you. I First I had a shock. I think this is Paul admitting that he had a culture shock. He said, I walked in and I saw a lot of idols. I'm so sorry. We began arguing. We need to stop our arguing. You want to know about me? I already know about you. I want to know more about you. I can see this. You have many idols. You're religious. You worship. Remember Jesus' conversation with the Samaritan woman? God is looking for worshipers. So he said, I come here and I find worshipers, religious people. In fact, you have a God that you don't know about. Well, let me tell you, your poets wrote about him because in him we live and we are and we have our being. We are his offspring. You know that this unknown God is our Father. Let me tell you about him. And the gospel was preached. What a great attitude that Paul had. What a great attitude. So, with this in mind, with this story in mind, we're going to look at how to deal with the culture shock so that we become better cross-cultural evangelists. How do we deal with that culture shock? Because we're going to find some really, really shocking things when we are trying to share the gospel, when we're bringing the gospel to a different culture, whether it is around the world or whether it is in your neighborhood. Notice here, verses 23 and 28 that we just read. Paul was an expert at adopting the cultural practices necessary to share the gospel effectively. He was an expert. He found the things that were necessary from the other culture so that he could share the gospel effectively. So there are certain things in the other culture that we can use effectively, but only the necessary ones. Only the necessary ones. If you remember last week, I asked a question, and that's how we finished the class. What are you willing to change? What are you willing to accept when you enter a different culture? There's certain things that we're gonna have to accept. But how do we know what we should accept and how do we know what we shouldn't accept? Again, Paul gives us a beautiful example. He said, I looked, I heard, I read, I understood who you are. Now I'm going to use the necessary things in order to share the gospel effectively with you. So I bring to you this teaching today. We can't just walk in and start sharing the gospel immediately, thinking that we're going to be effective. Something needs to happen in us before it starts happening in them. A change happened in Paul's heart. At first, big shock. A lot of idols. He immediately went and started reasoning with them. And then they argue with him. And then they brought him and they said, You're a blabber. We're not sure what you're saying. We don't understand. We know it's a new teaching. We like new teachings, but we don't get yours. And Paul finally said, Okay, I'm going to accept that you're religious. I'm going to accept that you worship. You worship the wrong thing, but I'm going to accept it. I'm going to notice that you have a temple, and I'm going to accept what your poets write. Let me bring it home to you. Wow, what a great way of doing this. What a great way of doing this. So, with that in mind, I want you to write these two words right here. These are very important words as we approach a different culture. Important definitions. The first one, homogeneous. This is a group of people. This is a group of people who share common biological, racial, ethnic, historical, and cultural characteristics. Sometimes you're going to find a group of people who have everything in common. They're from the same race, they have the same ethnic characteristics, they share the same history, they all come from the same place. They know who their heroes are, they know who their villains are, they know who their presidents have been, they know the changes that have happened. They share all of these things. That was very common in the past. It's not as common today, but it's still around. There are still places in the world where you get there and you know that they're all different to us, but that they're the same to them. You can find a group of people, a group of young people who they share everything and nobody gets them, but they get each other. They understand each other very well, but we don't get them. Now, the other word, heterogeneous. It's a group of people who have a variety of biological, racial, historical, and cultural characteristics. The key words here are variety, and they share a common one. So we're going to find both of these type of cultures. In one which they all think the same, they all act the same, they all behave the same, they all worship the same, they all look the same. And we're going to find the other group of people who they have different characteristics. That's the hardest one because you walk in and you don't know how to share the gospel because everybody thinks different, everybody behaves different, everybody dresses different, and you have to know how to do this. That's a culture shock as well. That is a culture shock. Okay, are we good? All right, remember that this is in the video. We'll keep going.
Homogeneous people are really difficult to get into.
Yes. How do you, because they're all against you, right? And you cannot break their traditions. Oh my gosh. You cannot break their traditions. They may accept the gospel, they may start reading the Bible, but then the next day you find them doing what they shouldn't be doing anymore.
It's kind of like the Mennonites.
Exactly.
You cannot break them. It's very difficult. They are very united. they share a lot of common things, and they do not mix with people from other races or religion or ethnicity.
Mhm. Yet we need to learn how. We need to learn how. Paul, Paul learned how. We, there has to be a way. There has to be a way. We must find a way. All right. So here, this is the question I finished with last week, and I had you thinking about this. How do you know in advance? That's the key word. How do you know in advance what things you will accept and what things you will not? Because if we're going to go share the gospel, we're going to have to be in there with them. Remember how I told you that Jesus did it? Remember the story of the Syrophoenician woman? He went there. He was there with them. He went into one of their houses. He went to Samaria, and he said it was necessary for him to pass through this village so that he could reach them all. So we're going to have to go. The Bible says go. We normally start a church and we tell people, please come. The Bible doesn't say get people to come. The Bible says you go to the people. You go to the people. So remember that.
Yes,
So,
sir. Sir, one of the things that, in our culture here is, we have many different cultures in our society that living in our country. And one of the problems too for us is a language barrier.
yes.
I mean, we go, countries, we have many different ethnic groups and they have their own, like you say, native language. And so an interpreter is something that sometimes are used. Like when if we're sharing with a different culture that speaks a different language, and then we'll probably utilize an interpreter. But if we go right across in our neighboring countries, right across all the Belize, like in Mexico, that's a huge cultural shock for us because our language could be a big barrier for us to communicate. Not everybody speaks this, different language. They are bilingual in Belize.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. To me, it was a culture shock when I arrived in Belize. It was a big culture shock. Oh my goodness. But imagine if God calls me ever to say, you're going to go live in Belize. I need to be ready.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be ready. So what I need to know in advance what things I'm going to accept and what things I'm not going to accept from the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's look at this. So there's some basic things that we need to know about cultures. Now we have learned about communication, we have learned about listening, we have learned some techniques, we have seen how Jesus presents himself as a multicultural, cross-cultural share of the gospel. And so we need to start learning about cultures. We won't get too much into this, but we need to learn some basic things. Number one, there's always a communication problem. There will always be, like my brother Humphrey just said, there will always be a communication problem. My brother, you introduced this very, very well. This is exactly where I'm heading. The language. There's always a community. And now notice, I'm not using there's a language problem. I'm saying a communication problem because sometimes it's not about the way we speak. We may speak the same. We may speak the same. Oh, I don't want to use the word language, but we may speak the same. We may learn the words, we may learn the vocabulary, but the way that we dress may offend them. They may say, "Oh, he learned our words, but he doesn't dress like us."
Mm-hmm.
So there's always going to be a communication problem. Our traditions. Oh my goodness. Oh, believe me, I remember the missionaries going to Guatemala when I was a kid, and they would talk about Thanksgiving. We had no idea what Thanksgiving was. We didn't care Thanksgiving. Oh, we're gonna eat turkey. Why do we have to eat turkey in November? We can eat turkey any day. Oh no, you're supposed to eat it in November. Well, we're not supposed to do anything. That's your culture. Our culture is different. Something that simple. Something that simple. So there's always going to be a communication problem within cultures, within mass cultures, and also with tribal cultures. And I want to get our attention to this. Sometimes it's a mass culture, like a whole country, a whole village, a whole big group of people, but there's also the tribal cultures. Our cultural upbringing shapes the way we act, the way we feel, and this is very important, the way we think about aspects of life. So all of us have a culture that has shaped the way we act, it has shaped the way we feel, and it has shaped how we think about the aspects of life, how we think about marriage, how we think about drugs, how we think about religion, how we think about every aspect of life. And we must walk in a different culture aware of that, whether it's talking to a group of people or to an individual of a different culture. We must remember that the way they act, the way they feel, and the way they think about aspects of life may be completely different because of their cultural upbringing has shaped that. So they may not think the same about certain aspects of life. We must be aware of that. It's going to be a shock. There's going to be a shock. We must learn how to deal with that culture shock as soon as possible. Look at Paul. Paul had a shock the moment he walked in. He saw many idols and he started reasoning with people. They came to him, they argued, they said, "You're trying to teach us something. We don't get it." Paul said, "I need to get past this. I need to get past this. And I need to get to the point where I can share the gospel." So I'm sorry, I put something in Spanish here. I apologize. So basic things about culture. Culture is the way of thinking. It's not just the way of doing things, it's the way of thinking. That's why the gospel says we must renew our mind. The way of thinking, feeling, and believing. It is the group's knowledge stored for future use. So the way they think, the way they feel, the way they believe, and the knowledge they have, so that when the time comes, they can make decisions, they can continue living, they can do life. They can do life. So they collect all these things, the way they think, the way they feel, the way they believe, they turn it into a knowledge so that they can continue to move forward. Also, culture is an integrated system. Remember this, of learned patterns of behavior, ideas, and products that characterize a society. So it's not just their ancestry, it's not just ways of thinking, it's learned patterns, behaviors, ideas. So we can define a culture maybe we can define a culture by many ways. I'm just going to leave it like that. It is not necessarily an ethnic group. Notice I haven't used ethnicity here. Notice I haven't used that, or a country of origin or town of origin. No, because it can be two people that were born in two different countries, yet they have the same culture. So remember that. Remember that. Okay, another thing, culture is learned. We are not born into a culture. We learn the culture that we're born into. I'm going to repeat that. We're not born into a culture. We learn the culture we're born into. It's not biologically determined. I was born in Guatemala, but my culture is very Americanized by now. I've been here so long. If I cannot say I'm a true Guatemalan anymore. I can't say that because I have learned a different culture. I may have the blood of a Guatemalan, but I am no longer a Guatemalan by culture. It's not biologically determined or restricted by race or ethnicity. For example, being hungry is not a cultural issue, right? However, the taste of food can be. Two people from two different cultures can be hungry. Hunger is not a cultural issue, but what they choose to eat, that's cultural. That's cultural. One can say, "Oh, I'm from the Far East. I want Chinese food," and the other one says, "Oh, I am from Latin America. I want Belizean food." That's culture. So it's not the hunger, it's not the eating, it's the taste of food. Remember that. And the way we eat with our fingers also. Some people eat different in different cultures. Spoons, knives, forks, even chopsticks, that's part of the culture. We have to remember those things. So it's something that is learned. Also, culture is something that is shared. It's commonly accepted by society. Everyone understands the meaning of the flag, traffic lights, currency system, but on the other hand, the glory of the sunrise or the fear of thunder aren't cultural reactions. They are universal reactions. There's a lot of things that we share. There's a lot of things that we share. Here's another thing. Culture is integrated. All parts function in such a way that they affect each other and contribute to the whole. That means that if a group of people live together, they're going to start forming their own culture in the way I think, the way the other person thinks, the other way we start integrating, and a culture is born. Even if we're born in different countries, even if we have differences, a culture gets formed, it's integrated. And also culture changes. Oh, we have seen this. I'm sure you have seen this plenty of times, plenty of occasions, as a result of innovations, internal pressures, cultural borrowings. This is very important. When I was down there, Pastor Keith, District Superintendent Keith, told me something about the United States. He said, you need to get it right, because if you get it right, we will get it right. If you get it wrong, we'll get it wrong. He wasn't talking about me. He was talking about the United States. Because there are many things in Belize and in many other countries that they have borrowed from the United States culturally. Some cultures change quickly, others more slowly. We tend to change devices and technology. Have you noticed this? We tend to change devices and technology much faster than behavior. Okay? So all these things about culture we need to be aware of. It's integrated, it changes. Yes, my brother?
Yes, Reverend, I just want to mention that you said culture is learned, it's not biological. How in the event that you are in marriage where you marry somebody from a different culture, I mean, you can have dual culture. I mean,
oh yeah.
If I married, my wife is from a different culture, and she learned my culture and I learned her culture.
Right. And now you have your own culture, right? My wife is from Mexico. We both spoke Spanish. We both like similar foods. But when we got married, we found out really fast that we had very different cultures. Very different cultures. So there it is. It's integrated, it changes, it's learned, it's shared. All of those aspects need to be mindful. Now, here is our big problem, and this is where I want most of your attention. Everything I have said comes to here. There's a big problem that we're going to have as cross-cultural evangelists, and it's the problem of the culture shock. What happens? What are the 3 stages of a culture shock? Okay, everyone goes through this, and you probably are going through one. If not, you're going to go through one, especially if we want to share the gospel. There's a culture shock. The first stage is called the tourist stage. So I want you to write, we're going to do a little triangle. I'm going to explain him here in a little bit. The second stage is the rejection stage. And the third stage is the recovery stage. And guess what happens? You start over again, and you start over again, and you start over again. I wish it finished in the recovery stage, but no, something else about the culture shocks you, and you go, "Oh my goodness, I thought I learned everything about this culture. I have to start over again. I did not know this aspect. I did not know this aspect." We could use this in marriage. You can take this teaching and use it in marriage, right? Once I explain it, you'll see what I'm talking about. But
Food is one of the biggest ones.
Which one?
Food.
Food. Oh, yes. Oh, believe me. Yes.
Food.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. In marriage, that's a big thing, right? And in cultures, yes. Oh my goodness. Yes, 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 yes. I love Belizean food, by the way. I had a big shock at the beginning for about a day, but I went through my tourist stage. Then there was a moment when I said, I don't know if I'm going to eat that. I don't know what it is. But immediately I went into the recovery stage and I started, and now I love it. Now I love it. But I know people who probably will go down there and will say, it was good while I tried it. I'm never going to eat it again. That's their problem. But here it is. I'm going to keep going. I'm going on a rabbit trail here. So let me explain all of this to you so that you can find out where you are and you can move quicker through this culture shock so you can get from the tourist stage as you enter the rejection stage and you can go to the recovery stage and begin to be an effective evangelist in that new culture. Until you get here, you will not be an effective evangelist. All right, let's talk about the first stage, the fascination or the tourist stage. This is when you enter a new culture and you go, wow, look at all these new things. Look at the way they talk. Look at the way they dress. Look at how they speak, their accent, and you're just observing. You're not necessarily liking it. You're just observing. You go, this is different people. They look different. They act different. They call things different. I call this something. They call it something else. The way they raise their kids, the way they treat their wives, the way they think about marriage, the way they think about life, about education, about school. You start going through that touristic, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's information, and we are entering. We're tapping into that new culture. But then we enter the rejection stage. What happens here? Oh, this is the hardest one, and it is the longest one. And if you get stuck here, you're going to have a really hard time and a lot of headaches. What happens?
Discouragement.
Yes.
You
The
don't like
fast-
it.
Well, the fascination begins to fade. We're no longer fascinated. We're no longer going, wow, look at all these new things. We don't think about them anymore. It begins to fade and we're going, oh no, what is this? What is happening? The newcomer, which is us, faces difficulties of living in a new culture because you're not just visiting, you're living in that culture. You're one. Jesus went and became part of them. Jesus, you remember he went and he moved to Capernaum. He did not live in Bethlehem. He could have stayed in Bethlehem and say, okay, this is where I'm going to do ministry. No, he went to a very cross-cultural city. He went and lived there. He experienced this culture shock. I'm sure that he, after being raised in the Jewish culture, the Jewish tradition, the Jewish religion, all of a sudden he was looking at people from Mesopotamia, people from Egypt, and going, wow. Somebody can say, well, but Jesus was God, but he went through the shocking, the cultural shock in order to reach many. What happens? How do you know you're in the rejection stage? Notice that this one. We try to function by applying the rules of our own culture. That means we're still in the rejection stage. We have not gotten out of it. We start thinking, oh, okay, well, this is how they do it, but I'm going to live different. Let me give you an example. This is going to shock you. I was in Spain a couple of years ago, and we were visiting some churches, and I found a lady from Bolivia. Okay, there are 6 or 7 hour difference between Bolivia and Spain. Okay, when it is 7 in the morning and 6 in the morning in Spain is about 1 p.m. I'm sorry, when it's 6 in the morning in Bolivia is about 1 p.m. in Spain. It's big difference, big difference. Well, I was talking to her and I said, no, she told me, oh, you can call me really late. Don't worry, I'm up until about 2 in the morning. I said, why are you up until about 2 in the morning? That's gotta get you tired. She goes, well, I'm from Bolivia, so time is different in Bolivia, so I'm still up at 2 in the morning because it's only 6 p.m. or 7 or 8 p.m. in Bolivia. I said, oh, you're still not used to the time change. She said, that's right. I said, how long have you lived in Spain? She said, 17 years. 17 years, and she still said, I'm not used to the new time here in Spain. I said, how do you live here? How do you live here? And I thought to myself, she probably is trying to live under the rules of her culture, even though she's in a different culture. Mm. I remember when I was a kid, they took us, and I'm saying all this with love. I'm saying all this with love. My father was a musician, and we were asked to visit a Methodist church. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, it was church brothers and sisters, and my father said, "I want you to pay attention to the pastor. He's a missionary." I went, "Oh, okay, great." And my father said, "He's from the United States." Oh, great. It's one of the first times in my life that I was meeting a missionary from the United States. And I walked in and they spoke different. You know, how they had that, they were speaking Spanish, but had that English accent. And we spent time with them. We went in the service. My dad did some music. And then they invited us to eat at their house. And we were walking to their home. And my father told me, let me stop sharing the screen right here because I want you guys to listen. My father told me, be very careful when you walk in their house. And I said, why? He said, the moment you walk in their house, it's like going to the United States. And I thought, what is he talking about? Well, we got to their house and it looked different. The houses around it looked like houses from Guatemala, but their house looked different. It had a wall. You know, normally our houses in Guatemala, they have patios, everything. No, this had a wall around it. We opened the door, and for the first time in my life, I saw something called carpet on the floor. And I looked, I said, I was about 8 years old. And my dad said, take your shoes off. Why? Because you're going to get the carpet dirty. Oh. And I walked in, the furniture looked different, the TV looked different, it smelled different. And when we sat down, they gave me something called bacon. I had never seen bacon in my life. And I thought, what is this thing? And my dad said, eat it. Why? It looks weird. And I took a bite and I thought, oh, this is the greatest thing in the world. I love bacon. I love bacon. What a culture shock. But now that I'm older, like Paul said, I'm older now and I understand they were living with their rules in a different country. I don't know what happened to them. I don't know if they came back to the United States, but I don't know how many people they share the gospel with truly from their hearts, especially if in their houses they were living under different rules. Think about that. Think about that. All right? They were definitely in the rejection stage. They were sharing the gospel, they were preaching, but they were still not within our culture. They were still Americans in Guatemala with American culture in Guatemala. I don't think that was right. I don't think that was right. Let's keep going. All right. So what happens? The person starts trying to apply their own rules of their own culture. When it doesn't work, because it's not going to work, when it doesn't work, they start rejecting the new culture. And even worse, they start blaming it. They start saying, oh, no wonder you're the way you are. Look at everything you do. You're doing it all wrong. If you did it my way, it would work better. But you do it all wrong. That's why you are the way you are. And we start blaming him. No, not good. Not good. And then what happens? We disassociate as much as possible from the members of the new culture. We are with them, but we're not among them. They're not our friends. They become our projects. We are not sharing our heart. We're sharing the gospel, but we're doing it from a distance. They see us as people who bring new ideas. Remember those men took Paul and they said, you are trying to tell us something. You bring this new idea. We want to know what it is. And Paul was arguing with them. It says that Paul was sharing about the gospel of Jesus with them, but they didn't get it. Paul was trying to share from his culture, not from his heart. His heart had not changed. He wanted to share it as a Jewish, but he needed to share it as one of the main from Athens. And what happens? This is really bad. So we no longer we're no longer their friends. We don't associate with them. But then we take it to the next level. We only associate as much as possible with members of our own culture. We start looking for people who share our culture. So it's us and them, because at first it's me against them. Well, I don't accept it. It's not working. You guys are bad. Your culture is wrong. I have the truth. I don't think I want to hang out with you. No, I'm going to go find other people so that they can be my allies, so it can be us against you. And what happened? We completely miss out. We completely miss the purpose. This is something all of us are going to go through. If you are saying in your heart, no, I don't think that's going to happen to me, it will at one point. Be very mindful of that, because it's very subtle. It's not intentional. It's very subtle. We face our difficulty. We can't adapt. We can't adapt. We try to apply our rules. We start rejecting it. We don't want to mingle with them anymore, and we end up trying to find others. In Spain, they had a problem with that for a while. We, the Church of the Nazarene, had a problem with that for a while. We started planting churches. But you know what happened? People would come to our churches, but only people from Latin America. There was a family from South America. I believe they were from Colombia. I can't remember very well. Don't quote me on that, but they were from South America. And they started planting churches, a church. And you know who they were reaching out? Other people from their country. They would go and find other people from their country, and they started coming. You walk into that church, there's about 50 of them, and none of the 50 people in that church are from Spain. They're all from a different place. So are they reaching Spain? No, they're not reaching Spain. They're reaching the immigrants to Spain. They are not reaching Spaniards. Not good. Not good. Praise the Lord, things have changed in the past few years. They are now reaching Spaniards. Thank God for that, because God sent them there to reach the Spaniards, not just to reach people of their own culture. What was going on? They were in their rejection stage for so long. People were coming to Christ, but they were only associating as much as possible with people from their own culture. All right. What happens? What's the third stage? The recovery stage. Oh, praise the Lord, there's a recovery stage. What happens? What happens when a person enters the recovery stage? It begins, how do we know it starts? It begins the moment we begin to learn the language. Now, do you remember the story of the missionaries I told you about? They spoke Spanish. They did, but they hadn't learned the language. They only spoke Spanish. If you remember the definition of language that I gave, it can be done written, traditions, clothing, music, everything that involves the language of the new culture. Once we begin to learn it, we begin to say, okay, I'm going to learn their music. I'm going to learn their clothing. I'm going to learn the way they see life. I'm going to remember the definition of culture as well. Remember, I told you that is the way they think, the way they act, the way they behave, the way they see life. I'm going to start learning that language. That's when the recovery stage begins, when we are willing to learn their language. Also, when the person learns some of the rules of the new culture. Notice I use some. We are going to learn the ones that will help us effectively share the gospel. I'm going to say that again. We're going to learn the ones that will help us effectively share the gospel. Then what happens? The person begins to adapt. And the result, no more frustration. You remember the story of Paul? He was no longer frustrated. He said, okay, I can see you're religious. I can see you have gods. I can see you worship. In fact, I saw a God that you don't know about. Let me tell you about him. In him we live. In fact, you already knew about him. I'm sorry I was yelling at you. I think Paul was apologizing and saying, I'm very, very sorry. I try to reason with you guys. I, I, I I ended up look like a blobber here. I'm very sorry. Um, I'm not going to apply my Jewish rules here. I'm going to apply the gospel. Um, in fact, I'm going to speak your language and I'm going to read your literature. I'm going to look around your temples. Let me tell you about that God that you already know about. You just don't have his name. Paul entered the recovery stage. Beautiful, beautiful. So how do we do it? How do we go from here, from the rejection stage to the recovery stage? It begins. We know how it begins. We know how it begins, but how do we make sure that we are going, let me put it this way. How do we make sure that we go from here to here as fast as possible? We need to, we must go, we must be intentional about going from stage 1 to stage 3. This is where a lot of people are still stuck. We need to go from here to here, even if we go through that. So,
Reverend, it's like you were saying, it's very important for us to learn about their customs and tradition, about the culture before you actually go in, and to learn about their customs and tradition is very important for us. So
yes,
to learn about that, that would be helpful.
to speak the language.
The
We
language
must
as
learn
well.
yes.
Mhm.
Imagine doing all this homework before you get there. It'd be really nice, right? Be really nice that you by the time you get there, you're not frustrated. But it's kind of impossible. You have to be in there. You really have to be in there. You have to live it.
Because
Okay.
when you're going to a new culture, sir, it's there could be many reasons for you're talking about lack of acceptance, rejection and acceptance. And it could be the reason for that could be by your approach. Like we were saying, to the culture, it could be maybe some because of some environmental aspects of it. Maybe it's just it's a culture where it's a different climate for you, and you but when you talk about the lack of acceptance from the culture, it could a lot of it has to do with the way you, like you said, like you go and you don't go there and you impose your own culture and tradition, and then you gotta learn how to actually communicate with a new culture by learning about their tradition and their customs and their ways. It has a lot to do with language and dress and the way they the dress code and all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
We must learn the right things that will help us to share the gospel effectively. Because if we are not careful, we're going to start learning other things that we're not going to be able to use. So, so that's important too. We must be wise. This is the solution. This is the solution, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. Cultural anthropology. That is the solution. This is how we go from the tourism stage past the rejection into the finally and a place where we can start sharing the gospel. Okay. Number one, what is anthropology? Let me remind you of that. Does anybody know what anthropology is? What is that?
It's not the study of humans.
Correct. The study of humans and their behavior. Yes. Very good, Pastor. Very good. So, we must become students of humanity in their behavior. Okay. Now, cultural anthropology. If we learn it well, if we learn how to apply it, it can give us a perspective that will allow us to enter the new culture with the least amount of culture shock and a faster recovery. You will still have a culture shock, okay? You cannot avoid it. Please don't think, oh, if I know cultural anthropology, I'm going to walk in and immediately start saying, no, 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 you're still going to have it. That is just the way it is. But by applying cultural anthropology, it will be a less amount of culture shock. We'll still have it, but we are not going to be too dramatic about it. It's not going to hurt us as much. It will recover faster. It makes it possible to begin to advance in empathy, acceptance, and we can identify with them, with the new culture. Empathy, the things that we need to accept, and we will be accepted, and we'll identify with them, and listen to this very carefully. Please listen to this, listen to this. And they will identify with us. Because as much as we are in a culture shock, so are they. We're there and they're looking at us going, what is this guy? What is this woman? And they're gonna go through the exact same thing with us. They're gonna try to apply their rules to us. They're not gonna like some of the things that we do. They're gonna be frustrated and everything. So we have to remember that we go entering a new culture, they're in shock also because we're there. And we are in shock because we're there as well. So we need to get to the point to where both sides have empathy, there's acceptance on both sides, and we can identify with them, and they can identify with us. So this is very important to learn. Okay, let me stop right here. That's a lot of information. That's a lot of information, and I want to make sure that we process it properly. I want to make sure we process it properly. I want us to take a little bit of time to pray right now, because some of the things we have learned today, whether they're new or not, we're going to be facing them, or we are facing them already. And maybe for some of us, and I include myself, we have gone through a culture shock and we gave up on the second stage. And we walked away from somebody with a different culture. And we thought, they're not going to get it. They don't want to get it. They're too different. Their culture has them. No, they're lost. And we walked away. We never made it to the recovery stage. So we must either confess, we need to prepare, we need to ask God for guidance before we learn more about cultural anthropology. I truly believe that the Holy Spirit can guide us into this. So I'm going to stop the video right now, and we're going to spend a little bit of time in prayer. Amen. Thank you for watching this video. We encourage you to watch the rest of them. We encourage you to answer to the call of Jesus. Let's cross to the other side. But let's do it with wisdom and by the power of his Holy Spirit, because he did say, you will go to other cultures, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the end of the earth. You will go, but you need the power of my Holy Spirit to do it. Thank you. May God bless you until the mission is accomplished.